Thank you for tuning in to the CLMA Legislative Compliance and Regulatory Committee's analysis of the PAMA proposed clinical laboratory fee schedule. I'm Rod Forsman, and I'll give you a little history of where we are and how we got here. Medicare payments for clinical laboratory services have long been a target for cost savings. The Medicare Clinical Laboratory Fee Schedule, CLFS, was introduced in 1984 and was based on a percentage of the median of test prices surveyed at that time. And then it was 115%. It's since been ratcheted down to 74% of that median. Medicare Sustainable Growth Rate, SGR, legislation was enacted in 1997 with the intent to reduce Medicare reimbursements annually. Successful lobbying by the physician groups halted reductions in physician fee levels and replaced them with increases. The SGR law mandated overall reduction, and in order to pay for this doc fix, savings need to be found elsewhere. The clinical laboratory represents only 1.6% of Medicare spending, but has routinely been levied spending cuts to fund the SGR disparity. The Accountable Care Act, ACA, sequestration, and the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012 combined to produce a vastly disproportionate reduction in a laboratory reimbursement compared to other providers. For the first time in 30 years, CMS invoked their presumed authority to call for the repricing of all tests based on new technology. Certain laboratory associations negotiated for a repeal of this approach and claimed success when it was replaced by Section 216 of the Patient Access and Medicare Protection Act, PAMA, in 2014. This statute called for a market-based clinical lab fee schedule, and the rules that followed established a weighted median of individual private pay or test reimbursements reported by applicable laboratories. The narrow definition of applicable laboratory excludes hospital laboratories, but includes 45% of all commercial and 5% of physician office labs. This results in data heavily weighted by discounting pricing to large commercial payers. The presumption was that the product of these calculations would yield market-based prices significantly lower than the current clinical lab fee schedule. Beginning in 2018, existing prices would be lowered 10% each year for the first 3 years and 15% for the next 3 years, or until the established weighted median price is reached. This could result in a 55% drop in payments in 6 years. A $3.91 billion savings to the Medicare program was projected in the first 5 years. These fees will be applied to all who are paid on the clinical lab fee schedule and will likely extend to private payers who pay using a function of the clinical lab fee schedule. The Office of the Inspector General recently released a September 2017 analysis of Medicare payments for clinical laboratory. It shows reimbursements dropped $200 million in 2016 compared to both 2014 and 2015. This, combined with the projected decrease of $670 million in 2018, will produce a reduction of $870 million. These changes far exceed the goals anticipated when Congress enacted PAMA. Mike Hilton will show us some of the details. Mike?
Thanks, Rod. Some of the relevant points from the preliminary data that was released by CMS, Medicare was paid $6.8 billion under the Part B for lab tests in 2016. Of the top 25 tests at Medicare payments, it's totaled $4.3 billion, and that represented 60% of all the Medicare payments for labs in 2016. The top 6 tests totaled $2.4 billion in 2016 and accounted for 35% of all payments. This new payment system will establish a single national fee schedule, replacing the current 57 separate local fee schedules. CMS projected a savings of $607 million for the first year, and that could save $3.9 billion over 10 years. I remember a $670 million savings for CMS means a $607 million cut to the lab industry. CMS calculations would result in an actual decrease in payments in 2018 of 21.9%, if not for the 10% limit of decrease for the first year. So looking at which laboratories were actually reporting to CMS during the 3-month period, 1,942 laboratories reported over 4.9 million lines of records. The OIG in 2015 payment review states that there were 61,000 laboratories paid on CMS, which means only 3.2% actually reported data. And of those laboratories that reported, only 21 hospital labs reported, resulting in less than 1% of data submitted, which represents 0.3% of all total hospital laboratories who could have reported. There were 1,000 physician laboratories, or POLs, which represented 7.5% of the data. or 0.5% of all POLs. Only 36 labs were situated in rural areas, which is less than 2% of reporting laboratories. 658 independent laboratories, or 20% of all independent laboratories, and less than half of the labs that the OIG estimated would report. Looking at the actual CPT codes that were reported, there were 1,360 codes. 75% of those codes will have a decrease, fee decrease in the first year. 58% of those have more than a 10% decrease and will be phased in over the next 6 years. 53 are going down by 50% or more. 826 will be going down between 10 and 49%. And 115 are going to be going down between 0 and 10%. And 134 codes will have an increased fee. The regulatory limit to a cut in 2018 is 10% of the national limit amount for the test in 2017, and it's silent for cuts for codes without a national limitation amount, and the agency did not address this in the proposed final rule. So 232 of the codes have no national limitation amount, and 44 of those have a national limitation amount of $0.0. So any code that does not have a national limitation amount is going to directly go to the full decrease in the first year. Here's just 2 examples of that. Lipid panel, the lipid profile CPT code 80061 is a top 25 test. An average in 2017 fee schedule was $17.86. The annual phased-in fees would have been $16.07, $14.46, and $13.02 for the first 3 years. Because there's no national limitation amount, the price is dropping to $11.23 in 2018 for a total decrease of 37%. Another example would be the acute hepatitis panel 80074, which had an average clinical laboratory fee schedule in 2017 of $64.04, but will drop down to $38.74 in 2018 for a 40% decrease. Those are just some of the examples of the decrease that we'll be seeing in the next fee schedule. And now on to Jim Weary, who's going to wrap up our presentation and where we go from here. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. As you all, I'm sure, understand that this proposed rule will be the most significant change to the laboratory industry since the implementation of CLIA itself. So, what is CLMA doing for you? Where do we go from here, and what can you do now as we move forward into this new fee schedule era? Here's what CLMA is doing. We took a 3-prong approach. The first prong is that our committee and members of CLMA communicated directly with the current CMS director, Seema Verma, and asked her and explained to her the situation that would be presented with the implementation of PAMA. We asked for a postponement and an expansion of the applicable lab definition at the time so we could meet the requirement of Congress of a market-based approach. From there, in conjunction with many of our medical colleagues, including the AMA, COLA, and the American Hospital Association, members of the LCRC met with staff members on the Hill on 3 very influential committees. The first one was we met with the Energy and Commerce Committee with the minority and the majority member staffers and expressed our concerns about PAMA. The second group we met with was Ways and Means, where we met with the majority member staff member. Third, we met with the very influential Senate Finance Committee with Brett Baker and Beth Erbel. And our asks, what we talked to each of them about was that the data obtained is not as Congress had intended. It was not going to be accurate because it did not include the market-based approach, would include physician office labs, hospital labs, as Mike and Rod both explained, but it did concentrate mainly on the independent labs. We felt that there was a need to validate the data. We were very concerned with the methodology of the analysis, which was a weighted median, that it would not really be indicative of what a fair market value would be. We knew that that was not the intent of Congress. We asked that the data not be implemented, or that the proposed fee schedule not be implemented until it was confirmed and adjusted. And by confirmation, we asked that the members ask CMS to validate the distribution. We asked the members to validate the required definitions of applicable labs, which in this case would be to include physician office laboratories, medical, small clinical laboratories, hospitals, and the larger privates. We also wanted the data to be transparent so we could analyze it and look at it and decide whether it really represented the market as Congress intended. We wanted also for the various committees to ask CMS to issue a final or an interim final rule with comment so that the industry itself could review the data and express concerns where there may be some. So that was our second prong. The third prong of what CLMA has done for you is now that the data has been published, and as you've heard from Mike, there are drastic reductions in store for our clinical lab fee schedule. We want to initiate our advocacy prong. CLMA, along with ASCLS, are initiating a grassroots effort. We'll be utilizing a program called Voters' Voice, where CLMA will be notifying its entire mailing list, as well as ASCLS will be notifying their mailing list via an email. And in that message, we'll be describing the PAMA issue. And if your data happens to be complete in this Voters' Voice database, it will preload, and if you contact them, it will preload your specific regulator's information, and we will also include a form letter which you can customize and express your concerns with the PAMA legislation or the PAMA fee schedule and its implementation. As all of us said, as CLMA has said often before, we feel that this decrease in pricing will create a situation where we'll have less access to laboratories for the beneficiaries. And this will be caused primarily due to a decrease in the number of labs, and will cause more testing to be referred to large reference labs, which obviously, as you know, will increase turnaround time and increase treatment time. So these are all things that we are going to include in the information to send to your individual Congress people. We will ask additionally in this letter that, again, as we've talked before, the data be validated, confirmed, and adjusted as per Congress's intent, which is market-based. And we want the data analyzed by a third-party group, as it is currently done with our pharmacy analysis. And Mike had mentioned that with the national limit amounts of 0, they go immediately to the weighted median. And we're recommending that you include, and we will include in our letter, that the starting point for any decrease will be the average of all of the state-reported payments that are currently included on the fee schedule. Another issue that we'd like to bring up in this letter that we want to enforce with our Congress people is we don't feel the weighted median is appropriate. We would think that the weighted mean is more appropriate. Another option that you'll have in this system is you'll have an immediate contact ability, which if you choose that option, will dial the phone for you to your Congress people to allow you to make a verbal report to your specific representative. And included with that will be a set of talking points that you can use to discuss the PAMA situation with your personalized as well as the talking points I've just gone over with your various staff members. So I'd ask you to please be on the lookout for an email from ASCLS and CLMA that will talk to you or that will explain to you the voter voice option. And we ask that you participate and respond to your individual congresspeople because that's how these grassroots efforts work. We are including for your information with our initial email the website for the data, the PAMA data and various analytics for you to review. And we are also including for you a question and answer link that should you have any questions about any information that we brought up during this talk that you can email into CLMA and they will forward that question to one of us. So we would like to thank you for your attendance and your listening to this conference, and would hope that you would take these recommendations very seriously. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our CLMA information email address. Thank you.